So in today's video, we are going to be discussing if the Philadelphia Eagles are contenders to win the NFC East. Now, before we get into the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and let's jump right into the video. So if we're looking at the Philadelphia Eagles, now obviously in my power rankings, I think they're the best team in the NFC right now, and we'll have a video out later making predictions of the NFC East and where I think they'll stand at the end of the season. So the schedule right now isn't necessarily a huge factor for the Eagles in this video, even though I think that the Eagles, they have a pretty favorable schedule for how their offseason is shaked out and for how much they have improved their team. So their schedule very favorable after just taking one quick glance at it. I think it's very favorable for them. But the schedule, again, not much of a factor. What really I wanted to look at was the moves that the Philadelphia Eagles have made compared to the other teams in their division to determine if I think that they are a contender to win their division. So if we're looking at their division, first, their division hasn't had a back-to-back winner since the 2001 to the 2004 seasons when the Eagles themselves won it 3 straight years. But there hasn't been a back-to-back winner or a consecutive winner since then. So that's one thing about this. The Cowboys, they won the division last year. So that's also a very favorable thing for the Eagles that they have that's a chance for them to win the division because nobody seems to want to win this division. It's somebody new every single year. But if we're looking at the Cowboys in their division, if we're looking at the teams in their division, first the Cowboys, they've had one of the weirdest off seasons of any team in the NFL. I think have had one of the worst, if you ask me, and that's no hate towards the Cowboys because that's never the intention. I don't want to hate on the Cowboys, but they've had a very weird and kind of bad offseason. They traded away Amari Cooper to the Browns, the disaster with Randy Gregory's contract, him backing out of his contract that he initially agreed on, and then moving on to sign with the Broncos. Cedric Wilson, they lost to the Dolphins. Keanu Neal signed with the Buccaneers. And this isn't a hate against CeeDee Lamb, but they're kind of hoping, it looks like at this point, for CeeDee Lamb to become the bona fide #1 receiver. He did improve from his first year to year 2, so that is something they can hang their hats on. But then they're also going to try to rely on Michael Gallup, who is coming off of an injury, and then James Washington, who's only cracked 700 yards one time. You have Zeke Elliott's contract, which is a massive cap hit, who hasn't really been that good. He seems to be getting worse every single year, and it just doesn't feel like the Cowboys have really gotten better this offseason. But on the bright side for the Cowboys, I know this is about the Eagles, the bright side, Dak had a really good season last year, 4,400 yards, 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. But then let's look at the Giants. The Giants, they've made the correct moves for their franchise and for the future of their team. They hired a new head coach with Brian Daboll. They brought in a new GM, Joe Shane, and they made the correct moves in the draft. They drafted Kayvon Thibodeau. They drafted Evan Neal. So they made the correct moves when it comes to the draft. So the Giants, they're on the right track. But if we're looking at that team, realistically, they're not going to be a good team because while I think Brian Daboll was the correct move, they have an uphill battle when it comes to getting Daniel Jones as a serviceable quarterback, and who knows, Daniel Jones may be gone. I mean, the Giants are kind of hoping that Brian Daboll can bring some of that magic that he did with Josh Allen, helping Josh Allen improve and become a better quarterback. They're kind of hoping he can do that with Daniel Jones, but at the same time, I just don't see that happening because Daniel Jones has been in the NFL so long and really hasn't been a good quarterback his time in the NFL. But anything's possible. But that situation with the Giants, even though that they've gotten better, they're not going to be a team competing in their division. But then you have Washington. Washington, again, is a really weird team, in my opinion. They have a mess up front at their front office. On the field, they have the talent, but they just seem to be disappointing. Their defense, especially because they had an elite defense in 2020, and then their defense regressed massively. I know Chase Young got hurt, but their defense regressed massively back last year. So with Washington, they also brought in Carson Wentz, who is on his last legs in the NFL. So with all of Washington and their uncertainties and their unknowns, their inconsistencies, and then Carson Wentz being on their last legs, I don't really see them really competing. So obviously it's down to the Eagles and the Cowboys. And then it's back to the question if the Eagles are contenders. And I think by far the Eagles are contenders. If you don't think the Eagles are contenders, I think you're a little bit nuts, obviously, because they've made the correct moves. The Eagles have this offseason. If we're looking at the Eagles, they've had an awesome offseason. And it was their draft that was really good, especially what they did the first night of the draft. draft. They drafted Jordan Davis to go on that defensive line, who is a really good player out of Georgia. They traded for A.J. Brown on draft night, which I think completely shifted their offense and how good I think their offense can be. And overall, the Eagles made the correct moves to make noise in their division and probably compete, because the Eagles, they were a team that made the playoffs last year. They may have gotten beaten really badly by the Buccaneers last year in that playoff game, but the Eagles just made the playoffs last year for a team that many people didn't have faith in, because it wasn't really that good for the Eagles to start of the season. The fan base was really upset with Nick Sirianni because he wouldn't run the football. Nothing was really, it seemed to be going right with the Eagles to start the season, but they got things right. Their running game definitely got right, and they started running the football more, and the Eagles were able to get into the playoffs, even though they had a really bad loss to the Buccaneers. But overall, what they've done in this offseason is great. Obviously, like I said, A.J. Brown, adding him to an offense with Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, great running pieces. Jalen Hurts at their quarterback position can run the football really well. You have Miles Sanders and Boston Scott, who are good running backs. So overall, the running game is great for the Eagles. And defensively, I've interacted with Eagles fans. They don't really think that their defense is very good, but I think their defense is good. Like I said, Jordan Davis on that defensive line to go with Fletcher Cox. They added Hassan Reddick, who's a really good player. They got Nakobe Dean in the draft, who just fell right to them. So that's another piece to their team that could contribute at some point and be really good, especially for how late they got him. In the future, he has the potential to be one of those guys like, why did everybody pass up on him? And then it gets to the secondary, which a lot of Eagles fans were kind of upset with. They didn't like. They had Darius Slay there, but other than that, there really wasn't much. But they just recently added James Bradbury to their defense. And I really think that's what kind of sparked my interest to make this, because the Eagles, Howie Roseman, has just had an unbelievable offseason this year. Like, he is making unbelievable moves to try to make his team better and compete in that division, because like I said, the division's wide open every single year. You can go in on paper being like, the Cowboys are the best, Washington's the best, this team is the best, but at the end of the day, it's about execution, and it just seems like every year it's a new team executing or doing something to cause a new division winner every single year. So obviously with the Philadelphia Eagles, they're contenders in their division. And I think, like I said at the beginning, I think they're the best team in their division right now, just based off the offseason and how things played out. But for them to get over the hump and win their division, I think at this point, everything is laying on the shoulders of Jalen Hurts, because Jalen Hurts, he's going into his second full year starting. He was up and down with Carson Wentz's first year. Last year was his first full year starting. So he's going into his second full year starting this year. And I think a lot of the success that happens with the Philadelphia Eagles is going to rely on the arm of Jalen Hurts. I think he has to play better than what he did last year, because obviously they got pounded in the playoffs, but that was a good starting point. And for a team that just made the playoffs, it sometimes can hinder the progress of a team getting better, and then they peak too soon. But that didn't happen with the Eagles. The Eagles, they made the playoffs, and it looks like they know that, hey, we made it, but we did not perform well. So a lot of the moves have been correct. They're setting up Jalen Hurts for success. I think the Eagles are contenders in this division. I personally think at this point they can win the division, because like I said, the schedule's favorable, but we'll get into that more in another video. But if we're just looking at everything that has happened with the Eagles, this team is set up perfectly to succeed based off of what Howie Roseman has done. But at the end of the day, a lot of this is on Jalen Hurts, and Jalen Hurts progressing and become a better thrower of the football. And if he does that, I really do see the Eagles winning this division and being a very good football team next year. But those are my thoughts on if the Eagles are contenders in the NFC East. Give me your thoughts down below. Do you think the Eagles are contenders in the NFC East? Give me your thoughts down below, and I'll see you in the next one.